Perfect. Okay, thanks, Shireen. Okay, welcome to those in attendance at this remote meeting of the Planning Development Management Committee on Thursday, the 18th of February 2021 at Aberdeen City Council. Please note this meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. The members, please actually keep your cameras on now. Because we're a quasi-judicial committee, it seems to be practice that you keep your cameras on. But keep your microphones muted unless you're invited to speak. If you're experiencing technical difficulties, if you could let the clerk know in the chat. So, you know, we understand that this will be a bit of an experiment because it'll be the first time we've got all committee members with their cameras on. So it's a bit of a trial today, so we'll see how it goes. If you're required to speak, please use the raising of the hand to indicate. The committee contains quasi-judicial business. Members are reminded that they should not leave the room or the meeting during consideration of any application. If you need to leave, please advise the clerk in the chat so it can be recorded in the minute. I'll now ask Ms. McBain if she could do a roll call. Okay.
Thank you, Convener. If we could just do a quick roll call to make sure members are in attendance. So, Convener?
Here.
Councillor Stewart?
Here.
Councillor Allen?
Here.
Councillor Radley?
Here.
Councillor Copeland?
Yeah.
Councillor Cormie?
Yeah.
Councillor Gregg?
Here.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Here.
And Councillor Malik?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all the 9 members present. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks. I don't know if you maybe not got a camera, Councillor Malik, to come on to. If you haven't, it doesn't matter, but if you have, if you can switch off.
Sorry. What did you say?
Because we're a quasi-judicial committee, we've been suggested that we should be having our cameras on so that it shows that we're in attendance during the whole meeting. So if you can, I appreciate some people can't.
Yeah, my camera is on. Yeah, my camera is on. Can you not see them?
No, I just see M&M, and Bill, you've disappeared as well. Just got BC.
Yeah, it's very strange actually. I can see Bill as well, and my camera is on actually.
All right. Lindsay, can you see them? Yeah.
Can't see me then.
I can see Councillor Cormie, not Councillor Malik. He's just
Right.
his initials.
Oh, okay. Well,
Right. We'll stop working. Right. So, right. Okay. Just give me one moment. I can dial from my mobile phone. Just give me one moment, please. I can exit, and then I can dial my mobile phone.
Okay, thanks. Lindsay, can you see Bill? Because I just see BC.
Yes, I can see him. Yeah.
No, I can see Councillor Cormie.
Yeah.
All right. Some of you can. I've just got a circle for some reason. But as long as you can see him, Lindsay from Democratic Services, that's all I need to be reassured.
He's definitely on the recording.
Okay, and I'll just wait for Malik to come back in. Hi, morning, Gail. Give Malik a minute to get back in. Last take off, Neil.
Certainly is. They're getting any better.
Oh, here he is. Yeah, I can see you, Malik. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
It's very strange. From my laptop, you are unable to see me, but from my mobile phone, you can see me.
Yeah, it's odd. I don't know what it is, but you're here now, so that's all that matters. Thank you, Malik.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to the business for today. Item 1.1, we've got motion against officer's recommendation procedural note. There is no determination of urgent business at 2.1. Any declarations of interest? I'm not seeing anybody indicating. Okay, we've moving on to the minutes on pages 9 to 18. Can we agree that was an accurate minute of the 21st of January's meeting? Great. Okay. Committee planner, sorry, at 5.1 on pages 19 to 22, your information. The 3 items are on the agenda today. Okay. Right, moving on to the business proper, where the recommendation is one of approval. The first item is at 6.1, which is listed building consent for the installation of CCTV, partially retrospective at Stonywood House, Aberdeen, planning reference 201036, planning officer is Mrs. Green. Can I pass to you, Lizzie? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Okay, this is a listed building consent application for 6 CCTV cameras at Stonywood House. So the house is located just here centrally within the northern part of Stonywood residential area. It has a sweeping drive which links with the residential streets to the north and south. And there's a tree planted area in between the house and housing area. So Stonywood House is category B listed and dates from 1850. It's of granite construction with harling to the elevations, and there are 3 cameras already in place on the front elevation. So the application is partially retrospective. This is the south elevation with the camera locations marked just in the pink circles. I will be showing you the elevations in a moment, so those locations will be a bit clearer on that. And this is the southeast elevation. That's the rear elevation facing the river. The north end of the building there. And this shows the locations of the various cameras around the building and the direction that they face. Onto the elevations, I've just marked the cameras with the yellow highlighter because they are quite difficult to spot. So that's the north elevation, the south again. That's the rear elevation facing the river. And the front elevation. So there were 29 objections to the application. The main issue of relevance was the impact on the character of the listed building, whilst many objections also drew in the public access issues relating to the current planning application for fencing and stating that the cameras are unnecessary. There was one letter of support justifying the camera's installation, stating that the house is sometimes unoccupied and that they were needed for security. So the issues for consideration are the impact on the character of the listed building. Public access to the grounds is not a matter for consideration under this listed building consent application. The relevant policies are in the LDP and national guidance and generally seek to preserve the listed building's character. The managing change guidance from Historic Environment Scotland is more specific and advises on matters such as the careful sighting, the cabling, non-ferrous fixings for the cameras, colours to blend in. And so the recommendation with these matters taken into account and the conditions that are recommended is that the application be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Green. I'll now ask, is there any questions for Mrs. Green on this application? Do you want to take that? That's thanks. Just in case I'm missing anyone. I'm not seeing anybody indicating the recommendation to approve conditionally. 3 conditions are set out on page 39 and 40. Is anybody otherwise?
Councillor Bolton.
Convener, it's Councillor Stewart here. My hand is up.
I think Councillor
Hi,
Bolton's
members.
frozen.
I think if we can just pause for one moment, I think Councillor Bolton's just lost connectivity. If we can just hang fire for a couple of minutes and I'll try and get her back in.
Okay, thank you.
It's going to let me in through my iPad. Yeah, I'm here. Okay, thanks. Bye. Right. Okay, can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some people would be quite glad I could get kicked out. But anyway, excuse me. So can I just confirm, Ms. McBain, that we've got that agreement that I think probably just for a recording, given the technical issues we maybe had, if we could just do a quick roll call to get an agreement.
Stuart's got
Thank
a
you,
hand up.
convener. I think Councillor Stewart had a question first, just when you got
Oh,
cut.
sorry. Councillor Stewart?
Thank you, convener. I'm not sure if it's appropriate or not, but frankly, I think it should be approved. It's most certainly safety. I think we've got the unanimousness of other members, but it's just, you know, when no one says anything and there's just kind of silence, I just sometimes think we should actually also say something. So in my view, it most certainly should be approved.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so unless there's anything else, no. Okay, can we just do a quick roll call, Ms. McBain, just as a safer.
No problem. Thank you, convener. So can members please just indicate that they're happy to approve the application conditionally? Convener?
Agreed.
Vice convener, Councillor Stewart?
Agreed.
Councillor Allen?
Approve.
Councillor Radley?
Agree.
Councillor Copeland?
Approve.
Councillor Cormie?
Approve.
Councillor Gregg?
Agreed.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Agreed.
And Councillor Malik?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. So the application is approved conditionally.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now moving on to 6.2, which is planning permission in principle for the conversion and extension of the existing two-storey hotel building class 7 to form 9 flats, conversion of the existing 1.5-storey hotel building class 7 to form a detached dwelling house class 9, and an erection of 2 semi-detached dwelling houses with associated parking, open spaces and associated work in the existing rear car park area at the Mariner Hotel, 349 Great Western Road, Aberdeen. It's on your pages 41 to 66, planning reference 200794, and the planning officer is Mr. Ledbetter. Mr. Ledbetter.
Morning all.
Morning.
Morning. I'm just trying to get my PowerPoint loaded, shared to everyone.
Morning.
Apologies about the delay. It's just waiting for the presentation to load.
Okay, we've got it up now. We've got the front sheet.
Okay, sorry, I'm not seeing anything on my screen. Right. Okay.
Got your description, address, and application.
Right. Okay. I'll get started. Sorry, this is the first time I've done committee in this digital way.
That's okay.
So apologies to all for any teething problems. Okay, so this is an application for planning permission in principle. So any images, any proposed images that you see will be just for indicative purposes, and we have considered those as a way of allowing the applicant to demonstrate whether the proposed level of development would be suitable for this particular site, mindful of the site's constraints. Okay, so the development is for 9 flats, 2 houses and 1 converted house from the smaller of the 2 historic buildings on the site. The application's been referred to committee, given there has been 6 or more objections, a total of 9. The summary of the objections in terms of the most material issues raised relate to concerns about adverse road safety impacts on Grey Street, arising from a perceived lack of parking and also the increased traffic flow from the proposed numbers. Also about the scale and design of the proposal and the subsequent adverse impact that could have on the Great Western Road conservation area. So in terms of the site context, it is set within a defined residential area. There's an office building to the east of the site. To the south, there's a terrace of residential properties along the eastern side of Grey Street. And on the opposite side of Grey Street to the west, there's the Bright Horizons nursery on the corner with Great Western Road, and a sort of circa 1980s, 1990s infill Muse residential development opposite the existing car park entrance. So this is just a suite of images of the existing building. So this is the primary building on the corner, and there's also a small historic building, the one which is proposed to be converted to a 3-bedroom detached dwelling house. They're sort of amalgamated by some modern infill extensions to the side and rear. This is an image of the existing 2-storey extension to the rear of the main historic building from Grey Street, and this is another image sort of showing the existing rear elevation of that large extension to the rear and the rather expansive car parking space from Grey Street and the existing vehicular access. You'll also note that there's a number of mature historic trees along this boundary with Grey Street, and there's also, coming back to the previous images, there's some in the front curtilage fronting onto Great Western Road as well. So moving on to the indicative plans, which the planning services use to consider whether the proposed level of development in principle would likely be acceptable. As you can see, some of the proposed some of the existing modern single-storey extensions have been removed to create that sort of distinction between the 2 historic properties, so they'll now become separated. Obviously, what's also noticeable is that whilst this is an existing car park, the applicant is proposing to put 2 semi-detached 1.5-storey buildings in the rear, and also dismantle the existing 2-storey extension to the rear of the principal historic building on the site and erect a replacement to accommodate the 9 flats. So the main considerations in reaching the recommendation have been, in terms of the impact on the residential amenity of the properties to the south. It's also been consideration afforded to what level of residential amenity would be afforded to prospective residents based on the proposed floor plans for the flats and the houses. Also about consideration has been afforded to the trees and how any replacement extension to the hotel, to the principal historic building in particular, might affect the existing tree root systems. And obviously under policy NE5 in the local development plan, we're really required to ensure that any development mitigates any adverse impact on the health of these trees, especially if they're considered to be of landscape and amenity value, which they are. It is the planning services view anyway that they are. And also in relation to a lot of some of the concerns raised by residents on Grey Street in particular, whether there's an appropriate level of parking. There's been a lot of consideration afforded to this in terms of discussion with the applicant's agent, their transport engineer and the roads department. I'm mindful that the site sits on a main bus route. There's room to accommodate cycle parking. And obviously we are in an age where we're trying to discourage use of private vehicles and to encourage more sustainable means of transport. The appropriate level of parking has been considered appropriate by the roads department, which the planning service is in agreement with. So moving on to the conclusion, it's recommended the application be approved, mindful that residential use of the site is considered acceptable. It is felt that the applicant has demonstrated that the proposed number of residential uses could provide an adequate level of residential amenity for prospective residents without unduly harming the amenity afforded to existing neighbouring uses. The site is obviously in a sustainable location, as I mentioned, and for that reason, the level of parking proposed is considered acceptable. There are, I think, 15 conditions attached to the proposed recommendation, which basically sets out some fairly restrictive points in terms of the layout and the scale of the proposed houses in the existing car park, and the extension to ensure that the development would likely have an acceptable impact on the Great Western Road conservation in terms of the character. And there was also recommended that the application be approved subject to completion of a Section 75 agreement to secure appropriate affordable housing provision, and the developer obligations, which is set out in the developer obligations assessment. Thank you. Questions?
Can I get you to take down here?
Sorry. Yeah.
Let's wait for it to put-
Sorry, I'm having a.
That's okay.
Don't know why it's not. Apologies. I can't seem to. I can't seem to get it off my screen. I don't know why. It's very unusual.
I wonder. It says I can take control, so I'll try and see if it lets me get rid of it for you. Stop presenting. There you go. That's it. Well done, Jamie, on your first one, though. It's better when you get one under your belt. I saw Councillor Copeland first.
Thank you, Camille. Just a very quick one. Is there a TPO on any of these trees?
Yes, and I think that, but you know, notwithstanding that, they're protected under the conservation area designation as well, and we've recognised the importance of these trees, and that the conditions that are set out in the report aim to safeguard the health of these trees. Should approval be granted.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, convener. Thank you for the presentation, James. I was just trying to see, in terms of the flats that are there, is parking for the flat? Is there no parking for the flats, but just parking for the houses, or is it going to be just a free for all in the parking that's provided? And how many spaces of parking are there in terms of how many houses or flat houses?
Yeah, so the proposed car parking arrangement, as you would have seen on the indicative plan, is effectively a communal car park for the 3 houses and the 9 flats. So I think the ratios, if I remember correctly, are 2 parking spaces per each of the dwelling houses. And I think there'll be 1 per flat. There's 1 disabled space and 1 visitor space, equating to 17 spaces in total.
Okay, thank you for that. I wonder if I could just ask another question. It's
Certainly.
just, I suppose I'm familiar with the area with Grey Street, and I would have some concerns about parking. So I imagine there would be overspilling onto Grey Street itself.
I could take our roads chat, but I think Scott.
Sorry, yes, because that I can ask it. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, convener. Yes, so as Mr. Ledbetter had alluded to, our standards for this site stipulate that there should be, I think it's 19.5 spaces, and they're obviously providing 17. So there's only a shortfall of, relative to our standards, that is, of 2.5 spaces. But also, as Mr. Ledbetter said in his presentation, there are a number of other means, such as cycle storage. It's on a bus route, and other mitigatory factors where we just feel the shortfall of 2.5 wouldn't be sufficient for us to form any sort of roads objection. And I do appreciate that there are concerns that there may be some overspill parking, but as I say, the shortfall of 2.5 spaces isn't significant enough for any real roads concern, and we couldn't seek any more spaces than those 2.5 anyway.
Thank you, convener. But so can I I can't actually see who's said all of that.
It was Mr. Leach.
Okay, Mr. Leach, thank you. I just wondered in terms of coming to that conclusion, and I would agree that maybe 2 spaces isn't a huge loss. But in terms of going out on site and looking at the area, I know for myself, it's not just a one-off time that I've had to, if I'm going down Grey Street, I've actually had to reverse all the way back up onto almost Great Western Road. And of course, because I'm a woman, I know that very well. But there's cars on both sides of the Grey Street, and it is very, very congested on that street. I just wonder if you've actually seen any, or roads, not you, but as roads, seen any of that traffic congestion. I mean, it's so many times I've gone down Grey Street. I'm obviously nipping down to the supermarket for tea, and that would actually happen. And nothing to do with the situation or at all with extra cars maybe being at home. It is a very congested, I would say, for at least 3/4 of Grey Street, and it gets to the situation where that you can really kind of only go one way and someone has to reverse.
Yeah, thank you. I do actually live in the area, so I walk past there quite a lot, and I am aware of similar issues just generally in the area, not just this vicinity specifically of the site. But as I say, it is relative to the standards which has gone through committee only a shortfall of 2.5, and even then the rationale here was that because every flat has 1 space and the houses themselves have the spaces set out in our standards, so it's only the flats that have a shortfall of half a space per flat. But as each flat has 1 parking space at least each, it's felt that even if we had gone for 2 more spaces, then some flats would have 2 and some would have 1, and that would probably create more confusion, and the owners of the flats might try and own more than 1 car, but then obviously they would be jostling for who gets that extra space. So we felt that it was appropriate that at least because they had 1 space each, and obviously if somebody who lives in the flats is disabled, then there's also the use of the disabled space. So in reality, there's only a shortfall of 1.5 spaces. So we, as I said, we felt that given all the other provisions, albeit that the area is quite congested, that it's virtually in line with our standards, so there wasn't much more we could seek there.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll leave it like that for just now, convener. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Gregg next.
Thank you, convener. I've got three questions. The first one is from page 57. There's mention there of the relevance of the policy on granite in connection with the new 2 semi-detached dwellings. Is that a requirement that's in the conditions? For example, is that in the condition relating to the finalising of the design, or is it elsewhere?
Hi, Councillor Gregg. Yeah, so you make a valid point. Yeah, so condition 1 is designed to seek the final details of that set of semis, and we would be requiring the applicant to submit a matter specified in condition application to secure details of those finishes. I think certainly our current view, and I doubt that this would change, is that certainly the facade of those properties would need to be finished in a granite to tie in with the existing 1.5 stories buildings on the same side of Grey Street. So there is, well, certainly the planning services of the view that condition would prove sufficient in order to seek those, in order to ensure that those buildings are finished in granite. I don't think that there is a specific wording in there at the moment actually requiring it. I would accept that, but the condition should be sufficient to reserve the matters to the planning authority to ensure, if members feel necessary, that the facade would be finished in granite.
Okay, that's reassuring. Thank you, because I think we would want to make sure that policy is being followed. Thanks for that. The second question was there was mention there that the parking requirement was 19.5, whereas in the report it says 22 is the parking requirement. So why the discrepancy?
Yes, thank you. So it was a member of my team who'd done the application, and the reason for the discrepancy is just due to interpretation of the standards, whereby disabled parking, for example, says it should be 1 in 20, but it doesn't explicitly state whether that should be for every 20 parking spaces, you then need 1 disabled parking space on top of that, or if you have 20 parking spaces, 1 of those should be disabled. And similarly, for visitor parking, it just says that should be at the discretion of the roads authority. So it's just an interpretational thing. That's the answer.
Okay, thank you. Clearly a bit of a conflict of interpretation there, but thank you for that. And the third and final question, it's with relation to that previous planning application at 357 Great Western Road. This is on page 61. There's mention there, 357 was the application for conversion of a residential property to the nursery, to the Bright Horizons nursery. This report mentions that there was no discussion about the nursery using the hotel car park. Whereas the report from 2011 does explicitly refer to the nursery being given permission to use the hotel car park. So I just find that the paragraph there says that there was it wasn't conditioned and it wasn't in the handling report, whereas there is an explicit mention in the 2011 planning report of use of the car park to take the pressure off of the local streets. Wondered if there was any comment on that.
I suppose all I can say is I didn't have the personal dealings back in 2011, I think it was, for the nursery application. And I think the reason why there weren't any, whilst there wasn't any condition specifically tied to that consent, that would be because it wouldn't have been competent to do so, because the applicant for the nursery wouldn't have had control of the car park for the Mariner Hotel. So from a competency perspective and meeting the test for a condition, it wouldn't have been competent to have applied such a condition. So given that there weren't conditions in place, it wouldn't be, it shouldn't really be material to the termination of this application. As I think I alluded to into the report, there might have been an informal agreement between the nursery and the owners of the Mariner Hotel, which I think obviously some of the objectors have mentioned about, but that would be an informal agreement out with the planning process. So arguably, well, as I've tried to sort of say in our report, that it really has limited materiality in that regard.
Okay, thank you for that. It was really just for accuracy, because the 2011 report does explicitly say the applicant has advised that an agreement has been reached with the owners of the adjacent Mariner Hotel that parents may use the hotel car park to drop off and pick up their children. So that, I mean, that was a factor in discussing and coming to a conclusion and an agreement on that earlier application. I just thought it was worth mentioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. I've got Councillor Cormie. Are you there, Bill? Ms. McBain, can you see Councillor Cormie?
Thanks, convener. He is there. I put him on mute because of that sound issue. So, Councillor Cormie,
all right.
put your sound back on.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, convener. My question was around about the 22 spaces. In the report, it says the technical car parking requirement is for 22 spaces, and the officer's telling us it's 17, but he answered it to Councillor Gregg, but I can't understand why you're putting that in a report and then changing it verbally. Anyway, my question would be, I mean, every time we've been up there, and we have been up there over many years in different applications, be it nurseries across the road or houses adjacent, and car parking has become an issue there in Grey Street. How does this compare, the car parking spaces, compared to when the hotel was there? Can you give us an idea what this, well, we can see what this is going to generate. What did the hotel generate? Cars moving in and out of that space. That's
Maybe
possible.
Mr. Leach, can you answer that?
Yeah, yes, thank you. So in the transport statement provided by the transport consultant working on behalf of the applicant, they provide this information, and I think it's section 5, and it says that the hotel use, I'll bring up the figures now, just so I'm not telling any lies. So the proposed development in the AM and PM peak hours respectively will generate 4 and 5 movements, and the hotel in the same peak hours generated 6 and 4 movements in the AM and PM peak. So in the morning you're going to see 2 less cars, but in the evening you're going to see 1 more car in the peak hour. So it's pretty inconsequential from a roads perspective, if that answers your question.
Yeah. So it's actually less movement with the flats, you're saying, is it?
Overall, yes. In the morning it'll be less, in the evening it'll be more, but so marginally it doesn't have any effect really.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing any other hands. Bill, can you pop yours down just in case you confuse me? I'm easily confused. I'll just double check. Can you see anybody, Lindsay? Because I'm obviously working off my iPad, and it's just in case I'm missing.
No, that's everybody.
Okay, right, folks. On page 51, there's the recommendations to approve conditionally consent to be withheld until a Section 75 legal agreement is secured to ensure the delivery of affordable housing and developers' obligations. There's 14 conditions set out on page 63 to 66, with 2 advisory notes on page 66. Is there anyone otherwise minded?
Yes.
Councillor Gregg, I see your hand. Okay. And Councillor Stewart. So Councillor Stewart, are you happy to second Councillor Gregg, who indicated first? Well, I suppose it depends. We'll have to hear what you've got to say, Councillor Gregg. Do you want to just give us a quick indication?
It depends what's being said.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I would be moving refusal, principally on the grounds of policy H1, which is on overdevelopment and impact on residential amenity and character of the surrounding area.
Okay, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Well, I would actually be looking at sort of adding to it that my concerns are more about the impact of traffic parking as a result of the development, and I would have liked to have seen more car parking spaces made available for the development. And whilst this is just something in principle, I feel that experience, I've been here before or many times when we've agreed something in principle, and then there can be, I would say, problems with future when the application actually comes for determination.
Okay, well, obviously the process is that we pause the recording and you go into the side lobby with officers to firm up your recommendation against officer, sorry, your moving against officer recommendation. So Ms. McBain, can we do that process, please?
Thank you, convener. So if you just give me a minute or two, I'm going to assign Councillor Stewart and Councillor Gregg to a separate room, and then you'll get a 10-second countdown, and then it will pop you into another room with the officers, and then you'll also have the option to rejoin this meeting once you're finished. So hopefully it'll work okay. So just give me a minute. Thank you.
I'm going to come out of this meeting and try and join back on my laptop, so I will be back, folks. I won't do anything until you've done your bit. This is slightly changed the normal way we did it, folks, so just in case you're a bit concerned.
So that should be the countdown on now. So you'll, yeah, the Councillor Stewart and Councillor Gregg will automatically go into that other meeting.
Okay, right. Well, I'm going to say just hang up on this one and try to get back on the
Okay.
computer.
So
Thanks,
sorry, I
Lindsay.
should have said as well for the other councillors, if you can just switch off your microphones, then the recording will still continue.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, you can switch off your cameras as well, sorry members, if you want to take a 5-minute
That's us back, is it?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Right. Can we just double check that all members are back and we can get them to switch on their cameras, please?
No problem. I'll do a quick roll call again, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So, convener, are you present?
I'm present.
Councillor Stewart? You're on
Yes,
mute.
I'm here.
Councillor Allen?
Present.
Councillor Radley?
Here.
Councillor Copeland?
Present.
Councillor Cormie?
Here.
Councillor Gregg?
Here.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Present.
And Councillor Mallet?
Here.
Okay, that's all the 9 members back present. Councillor Bolton.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, I'll move the officers' recommendations, and the reason that I'll be moving them, I absolutely understand the concerns of some of my colleagues. I know that Councillor Gregg made reference to things such as the use of granite, and it is actually in condition 8 on page 65, there is a condition that specifies that any granite downtakings will be reused within the site. So it's just to say that we did actually specify that. I think the main problem, I think, for most in looking at the objections is the concern over parking. But I think what the reality is, we heard from Roads that we would only maybe been allowed to get a further 2, but I think what we've got to look to is to the future, and we're trying to become carbon neutral. We're trying to remove unnecessary car usage, and it's going to be a painful process. We've adopted policies that support that, and because it's a marginal, if you like, loss of car parking, that's my reasoning on the car parking. Also, the parking spaces that we are going to get, again, it's on a condition that they'll be all have passive EV charging points. So again, you know, we're moving in the direction of a greener city. The bus service, which serves my ward as well, is an extremely good and effective bus service, which is on the main road, literally at their door. So again, there is very good accessibility to the bus services. Again, there is provision of cycle. And as I say, I appreciate that there was a mention of the Bright Horizons nursery, but there is nothing, we've heard that can't be taken as immediate material consideration. There's nothing in that. We couldn't have approved that application, making it partly responsible for this car parking, partly responsible for that development, as much as it's referenced. There wasn't a condition, and we couldn't have legally put one on because it's not for someone else to provide for another planning application. I think we're in a period of where I think we will see more hotels trying to diversify and may become residential accommodation. Again, this particular hotel, it's very sad to see it go. It's been there an awful long time, but we've got to, I think, be pragmatic and recognise it is a residential area. So each one does actually sit comfortably with this. I appreciate that there's maybe a feeling of overdevelopment, but you know, certainly the majority of letters I've looked at, it is about the car parking. And as I say, we have to recognise the policies that we're pushing forward with. And it is about trying to reduce the number of car journeys and cars within our city. And it's walkable to the city centre, obviously depending on your fitness, but there is a sufficient public transport system. You know, we haven't got the detail. I'm focusing on that because we haven't really got the final detail of what this will look like, because it is planning in principle. And I think it's a marginal one in terms of actual space, in terms of the additional semi-detached onto Grave Street. But I think otherwise it would have, again, turned into what would have looked just like a street car park. And I think they've tried to make best use of it. I think they've applied the parking as best they can. And I don't think it's sufficiently loss of parking in terms of the space numbers to warrant refusal. So I'll leave it really at that. Do I have a seconder? Can't see hands. Don't see any.
I'll be happy to second you.
Thank you, Councillor Copeland. Would you like to say something?
Yes, I think the officer's got this one pretty right. What we're looking at here is the principle of building on this site, not detailed plans. So I'm quite happy to support it for the things that you've said and the conditions on there. And of course, we'll look at it again when the detailed application comes in. So I'm quite happy to second you on this one.
Thank you, Councillor Copeland. Councillor Gregg.
Yes, thanks, convener. I'm moving refusal of this planning application on various grounds, principally on the ground of policy H1, which is there to protect our built environment from overdevelopment and which seeks to ensure that any permitted development fits in with the character and the amenity of the existing area. And I have serious concerns that this development will have a negative impact on the neighbourhood and further afield. And in relation to that, I think that it's been highlighted that there is an under provision of car parking spaces. There should be 22, and instead there are 17. So that's a lack of five spaces. We heard today that was slightly adjusted to a shortfall of 2.5, which is still insufficient parking. I think you have to be realistic that car ownership is with us and is not going to go away. People own cars and they need to park them, whether they take the bus or not. There is still that heavy reliance on ownership of cars and use of them. So we have to provide sufficient spaces for people to park their cars, and the surrounding area is chock-a-block full of parked cars. It's a densely populated residential area with well-known pressures on car parking, and I think it is very important that we do provide the right number of spaces so that the surrounding area is not negatively impacted by new developments, and in this case particularly by those new extra cars coming into the area. They need somewhere to park. It's also Grey Street is also a street that's well known for road safety issues. It's got the space of one vehicle, so it's not possible for two cars to go up and down Grey Street in opposite directions. So the additional volume of cars coming into that area, coming to that property in the corner, would add to the volume of vehicle movements in the area, which is also a concern, and that would be another example of unwelcome impact on the amenity of the area. That problem with road safety, I mean, that's a real one. Obviously, as it's a case of overdevelopment, I have concerns about the scale, the form, the massing of what is being proposed. It's a little too ambitious for that site. What is going in, although we don't have the detail yet, and this is just in principle. That volume of what's going in is cramming too much into quite a limited and constrained site. So I think that policy H3 on density is also relevant. We need to get the right level of development within these very sensitive and very restricted spaces. It's also within the Great Western Road conservation area, and I'm glad to see that there is respect being given to the policies on retention of granite and reuse of granite. That's good. That's welcome to see. But there's also policy D4 on the historic environment, and that does require us to give a little bit more attention and a little bit more thought to what we're putting into these heritage areas. So I think that not only is the scale and the form excessive and overbearing, but it's not appropriate for the conservation area. I think that there are alternative options. There is the opportunity there to create a more livable and a less overdeveloped type of residential environment in that site. Just a quick comment on that historical planning application on the other side of the road at 357. I was there. It was a carefully considered application, and there was a discussion there about a residential property being converted into a nursery with therefore quite a large turnover of vehicles coming and going at different times of the day. And there was a discussion about the nursery being allowed to use the hotel car park. So although that may not be a material consideration, it is a factor, and it does demonstrate that there's a history of parking pressures, parking problems at that precise site. So I think that's a useful reminder that this is not just a one-off problem with parking and road safety. It is long-standing, and for that reason, I think that more thought, more care needs to go into what's being proposed for this site. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Gregg. Thank you, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, convener. I still have lots to say. I'm pleased that the amendment is reflected what my concerns were about traffic, which actually came out through my questioning at the beginning with officers. My main concern is about the pressures of traffic, parking in this area. There is a serious problem there already. I would ask of fellow members of the committee to actually take a look at Grey Street and see the pressures that are there. As I said in my questioning and speaking earlier, this is not a one-off situation where if you're driving down from Great Western Road onto Grey Street, you more often than not will find yourself having to reverse up the road, and it's quite often difficult to pull in to allow traffic to pass because the street is not tree-lined, it is lined with cars on both sides of the street. It's a very difficult situation. Having fewer parking spaces at the development, I think will worsen the problem. And whilst it may be seen to officers that 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces is not a huge loss, if you were to multiply that across just the West End and in those few streets, it would be my view that that would have a great impact on the area. Multiply it by 4 applications and you have then 20 spaces short of car parking spaces. Whilst I agree with what the convener says, we are moving to a more sustainable way of living and electric cars. My understanding is that for there to be more electric cars and people borrowing, car sharing, is still many years down the line. People may well be able to walk into town from that location, and it's not far. But people have cars to travel to all sorts of places, not just city living. If I lived there, I most certainly would probably walk into town or take local transport, but I would still want a car to get to other areas. And so my concern is that there isn't sufficient spaces there. But my biggest concern really is about the congestion, potential pedestrian safety on Grey Street. It really was a dreadful situation that I found myself in, and when you live by experience, I think that helps to formulate your mind in determining applications. I think it is a concern. And as I said earlier, I think when we just agree something in principle, quite often when we come to agree it in full, it can be quite difficult to implement the concerns that were raised at the beginning. So I'm pleased that through officers' intervention that we were able to come up with wording that reflected my concerns, which are mainly to do with the traffic. So I will be seconding the amendment for this application. I prefer to be a bit more concise because you can't go prattling on for too long. Thank you very much, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Does anybody want to join in the debate? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, right. With that in mind, we'll just go to summing up. Sorry, Councillor Gregg.
I don't think there's, well, we haven't had a debate, so I don't think there's much point or purpose in summing up. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gregg. Obviously, I got the opportunity to hear from yourself and Councillor Stewart, which, you know, I'm always grateful to hear alternative points of view. I think one of our challenges is, and I know that Councillor Stewart alluded to, this is planning permission in principle, so we don't have a lot of the detail. So, you know, the impact in terms of the character and amenity of the area in terms of any design aspects is very difficult to judge at this point. But I am, you know, comforted that it's been acknowledged through conditions, and particularly condition 8, which talks about reusing the granite of any downtakings, including the wall. So, you know, there is references and there's sufficient conditions that means that recognition of it being an area of conservation and the character of the existing area will be high in the priorities of officers they bring forward for their applications to us. I think, you know, we say that the future of electric cars and people getting out of their cars is way in the future, but actually some of the timelines that we've got to meet are 2025, which is only a few years away, and it's amazing how time passes. And I know how difficult this is. But I think we've got to remember this was a hotel and a very popular restaurant previously, and there was traffic movements on a regular basis in and out of this car park. And I would suggest it was probably random people coming rather than residents who were maybe familiar with using this area on a regular basis. So perhaps by having it residential as opposed to people just patrons of a hotel or restaurant, there may be more consideration. Now, I would agree that the Grey Street is a very busy street, both ends of it. Obviously, the bottom end is a lot wider than the top end, you know, and I think that if I recall correctly, I'm not on operations now, but there was a paper came some years ago, operations to look at that whole area in terms of parking and one-way streets, etc. Now, unfortunately, for whatever reason, as I say, I'm not on that didn't go any further. But I think what we shouldn't be perhaps trying to do is resolve this situation, which, you know, I think already, if you like, exists in terms of the traffic movements because of the hotel and the restaurant being there. This is not just an empty piece of ground and we're putting something on it. There is an existing use, and you know, have a lot of cars coming and going. And I think the reality is we have to start making progress and trying to reduce the number of parking spaces. Yes, it's a few, and I know that people are always quite emotive and passionate around this, and I absolutely agree, Councillor Stewart. You know, we might walk into town, but we may well want a car if we're going out to the countryside or for a big shop. But I think we're trying to help people change behaviours. It's not just simply about a parking space. And I think with the EV charging points is a demonstration in itself. We've got the cycle, we've got the bus stop on the main road. I think what I'll look forward to seeing is more details as this planning application develops, and that will make sure that we do protect the character of the area, because I think we're all on this committee very passionate about the granite policy, and that's why we've kind of had it reinforced in it. You know, I'm pleased that we do have a condition on relating to it. But I think at the moment we're looking at planning and permission in principle. I accept that there's challenges around parking in this area, but we have had no objection from our roads colleagues. There's no evidence presented in our report that shows that there's been a history of accidents here. So on that basis, I'll just moving the officer's recommendation. Thank you. Ms. McBain, can we go to the vote, please?
Thank you, convener. So the committee has before it a motion in the name of the convener to approve the application conditionally and an amendment in the name of Councillor Gregg to refuse the application, and I'll just read out the reasons for refusal. So the proposal is contrary to adopted Aberdeen Local Development Plan Policy T2, managing the transport impact of development, due to the shortfall in parking provision to be provided on site when compared to the parking guidelines set out in the Council's adopted Transport and Accessibility Supplementary Guidance, which would exacerbate existing on-street parking to the detriment of safety and residential amenity, and the proposal would also be contrary to the Aberdeen Local Development Plan Policies H1, which is residential areas, and Policy D4, historic environment, due to the scale and layout of development proposed that is out of keeping with the pattern of surrounding development and would have an adverse impact on the historic character and amenity of the conservation area. So could members please vote motion to approve or amendment to refuse? Convener?
Motion.
Councillor Stewart?
Amendment.
Councillor Allen?
Motion.
Councillor Radley?
Motion.
Councillor Copeland?
Motion.
Councillor Cormie?
Motion.
Councillor Gregg?
Amendment.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Motion.
Councillor Malik?
Motion.
Thank you. The motion is carried by 7 votes to 2, so the application is approved in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, committee. That was an interesting discussion. If we could now move on to the final item, which is 6.3, which is detailed planning permission for the erection of a single-storey maintenance store and formation for perimeter fence and screening bund with associated works to access yard at Deeside Golf Club Fieldside. It's on pages 67 to 90. And it's planning reference 201511, and we've got Ms. Tasker to take us through the presentation.
Thank you, convener. I will just share my presentation.
And again, I believe it's a first for you as well, Ms. Tasker, so welcome.
Thank you. So are you able to see the presentation?
Yes.
I am, thank you. Yes.
So item 6.3 relates to an application seeking detailed planning permission for the erection of a single-storey maintenance store and the formation of a perimeter fence and screening bund with associated works to the access and yard. The application relates to an area of land set along the western boundary within Deeside Golf Club. The application site itself comprises an area of 1,650 square metres, located directly adjacent to the existing driving range and fields. To the north of the site, there is an existing buggy and store area. There are existing ancillary buildings located to the southwest, and to the west of the site, there is a small development of 5 dwellings known as the Grange, which are built upon land formerly owned by the golf club. We can see that in an aerial photograph as well. So there is some planning history to the site, which mainly relates to ancillary uses of the golf club. The application has been referred to the Planning Development Management Committee as a total of 7 objections have been received to the application. The matters raised in these objections are addressed on pages 86 to 88 of the agenda pack. In summary, the issues raised largely focus on additional disturbance to neighbouring residential properties, such as noise disturbance, and the impact of the proposal on surrounding residential and visual amenity. In terms of statutory consultees, all the comments are provided on 81 of the agenda pack. Roads Development Management have no objection to the application, and Environmental Health sought a condition be applied in relation to a noise impact assessment should the application be supported. So the key issues in determining the proposal against the relevant local development plan policies are whether the principle of the development is acceptable, the scale and design of the development, and the impact of the development on existing amenity. So in terms of the principle of the development, the site lies within the green belt. In policy, any 2 of the local development plan states that development must be within the boundary of existing activity, be small scale, not significantly increase the intensity of activity on the site, and any proposed built construction should be ancillary to what exists. The proposal will be located within the boundaries of the golf club and would not significantly increase the intensity of activity on the site, given that the purpose of the proposed store is solely to provide additional storage for existing machinery, so no additional machinery is proposed to be stored on the site. Here we can see a proposed site plan with the proposed building next. The building would measure approximately 15.8 metres by 48.5 metres and would have an eaves height of 4.2 metres and an overall ridge height of 5.9 metres. The building incorporates 3 roller shutter doors, various standard pass doors, and a total of 16 roof lights across both roof slopes. Finishing materials would include an insulated and profiled roof sheeting coloured dark green with matching cladding for the walls, UVC rainwater goods, galvanised steel roller shutter doors, and aluminium clad pass doors. So we can see that demonstrated on a proposed cross section as well. In terms of the floor plan, this shows how the building will be divided up, including a buggy charging area, a main machining parking area, and a workshop bay. Access to this proposed store is to be linked to existing roads serving the existing greenkeeping facilities. Also, along the south and east elevations of the proposed store, there would be a grass-covered screening band approximately 1.6 metres in height and a ball-stop perimeter fence approximately 8 metres in height. They would span approximately 60 metres along the south elevation and 20 metres along the east elevation. So then the site cross-section shows the main entrance drive to the north of the site, the existing embankment, and this is where houses at the Grange sit on a similar level, the application site, and then the practice range beyond this. The overall design and scale of the development is considered appropriate for the site. The proposed maintenance store would be located within close proximity of existing maintenance sheds. Other locations were explored by the applicant for the siting of the store. However, much of the site was discounted due to the majority of the site forming part of the lower River Dee floodplain. Other sites were then deemed unsuitable due to concerns regarding adverse landscape impact, road safety, visual amenity, and the proximity to residential houses. The proposal would undoubtedly create a large building. However, when considered within the context of the site owned by the golf club, the proposed store equates to 0.1% of the entire site. While the proposal would not be completely subservient to existing nearby ancillary buildings by way of footprint and height, which has a degree of tension with the criteria specified in Policy NE2 in relation to the requirement for development to be small scale, the need for this a building of this size has been justified by the applicant, and when considered within the context of the entire site, the development would be relatively small scale. So in terms of the impact of the proposal on existing visual amenity, the existing grass-covered embankment would sufficiently screen view of the proposed store from the north. To the west, it is noted that the proposal would be visible from essentially 2 dwellings within the Grange development. These are numbers 27 and 28 Golf Road. These houses are elevated above the application site by approximately 6 metres, and due to this change in levels, the proposed building is not considered to be unduly dominant or visually intrusive within the landscape from this perspective. Other views of the proposed store from other angles would be predominantly contained to within the golf course, and it is considered that the proposal would have no significant adverse impact on the landscape. The screening band and the perimeter fence have been stated to be required for safety purposes given the close proximity of the driving range. It is considered appropriate in relation to the site as a golf course, and given that there is a ball stop fence covering existing maintenance stores. Due to the change in level between the application site and neighbouring properties, the fence would sit approximately 2 metres above ground level at these properties, and would be visible within the landscape. However, the fence is considered to be not overly dominant due to the wire mesh material and is not considered to result in an overbearing impact next to these dwellings. And then lastly, in regard to the access, the proposal would be accessed via existing service roads to the existing maintenance sheds. There would be little change to the existing road layout, which is unadopted and lies within ground owned by the golf club. The roads development management have no objection to the proposal. So I can take you through a couple of site photos. So this is looking northwest towards the existing houses at the Grange. Here we are looking west, and in the middle of the photo you can see the existing ancillary buildings with the existing ball stop fence as well. Just beside this, we have houses at the Grange, and then on the far right hand side of the photo, you can see the existing embankment. And here we have a view looking towards the application site from the existing driving range. So in conclusion, the proposal would be associated with the wider use of the golf course and directly associated with the existing maintenance buildings. While the maintenance store would be larger in scale compared to the existing buildings, this is required in order to store larger machinery which exists within the site, and the proposal has been cited to ensure as minimal visual impact on its landscape setting as possible. Officers have concluded that the proposal would suitably accord with the relevant provisions of the local development plan for the reasons set out in today's report on pages 88 and 89 of the agenda. The recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions mentioned on page 89. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Members, questions? Right. I can see Councillor Cormack.
Thank you, Convener. There's nothing about the chemicals being stored within this building. But if there is, I would presume that appropriate flame-proof containers within the building itself would be used. I don't know if anybody's in a position to answer that.
Well, we've got environmental health here. I think who have we got from environmental health? Sorry, I'm just
Mr. Glover.
It's Glover here.
Hi, Mr. Glover.
Hi there, thank you. Yeah, I think storage inside, that would be a day-to-day management issue. So there are separate regulations relating to the safe storage of materials and chemicals. And no doubt there's fire regulations that would cover that as well. So I think that would maybe be separate. Mr. Lewis might be able to advise on whether that's an actual planning matter for consideration, but I can certainly advise that there's separate legislation to stipulate the standards for safe storage of certain materials.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Yes, that's not a material planning consideration. The storage of chemicals within the building will be out with our remit as far as consideration of planning authority is concerned.
Councillor Corby?
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that, Convener, but obviously there will be some sort of type of chemicals used. I don't know if they're going to be stored within this building or not, but if we haven't got any control over it, then we can't do anything about it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think Mr. Glover said that, so it's probably for someone else and not us, Councillor Corby. Councillor Radley.
Hi there, thank you. It was just about sort of the noise pollution levels on the site. Has any sort of consideration been given to additional noise proofing of the new building, if that makes sense?
I think perhaps we will take in Mr. Glover, because again I noticed on page 81 that environmental health have been out, so I'll maybe take him in. Mr. Glover?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Yeah, it may well require extra works for improved sound insulation. The way environmental health has approached this is that we don't think that there's anything that any noise that couldn't be mitigated against to a suitable level. So we've suggested that there's a condition, should it be approved, that an adequate noise impact assessment is undertaken, which would require environmental health's sort of sign off or approval that it's adequate. And in there, if mitigation is required, it should be detailing the specification required to achieve the required noise level standards at the nearest residences.
Okay, Councillor Radley.
That's perfect, thank you.
you. Could I just maybe follow on with that point? Because I noticed on page 81, comments from yourself, Mr. Glover, or not necessarily from yourself, but from Environmental Health. Now, it said this can be submitted prior to or after the determination. Now, Ms. Tasker, I'm not sure if you, in the condition that we've got there, that no development pursuant to this planning permission shall take place, nor shall the building be occupied. So I'm assuming that the details that Mr. Glover is talking about will be submitted prior to them actually starting to build it, because we don't. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I just wanted to check that's what that meant. The only bit that I was a bit concerned about in the condition, again, I'm not sure if it's yourself or it might be Dinika. We've got that within the building, unless the planning authority has given prior written approval for a variation. It kind of, can somebody maybe just elaborate on that one point of that condition? Because what I don't want is the committee approving.
I think Councillor Bolton's just crashed out of the meeting again, so if we can just hold on and I'll try and get her back on.
I'm back, Lindsay. I quickly went onto my iPad. I don't know what's going on today. Yeah, so it was just around the wording of saying that I wasn't just quite sure what that suggestion was, that they didn't have to do an assessment given we've conditioned it. So can we maybe just elaborate a little bit in there?
I'm just having a quick look at the wording of the condition. So it's, yes, sorry.
Hi.
That no development pursuant to this planning permission shall take place.
It's just I want to make sure an assessment's done rather than it saying a variation, because they might come back and say we don't want to do one, and I don't want that being approved.
Yeah, no, I understand. We would expect them to do one, to be honest. So even if they were to come in asking not to do it, we probably would not agree to it. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, perhaps what we need to say is that if there's a request to vary that condition, that it has to come back to the planning committee, because I think, you know, many of the questions have been around, or certainly from myself and Councillor Radley, want to make sure that there is a noise assessment, obviously, because most of the complaints have been about that. So I think we just want to make sure that if this is approved today, that any attempt to vary that condition, i.e. not do the noise assessment, has to come back to the planning committee. It
might be worth, maybe Mr. Lewis can advise as well, if we can vary the conditions slightly to take that part out.
That would be helpful. Mr. Lewis?
Yes, at the moment the condition allows a written approval for variation. I think the condition could be redrafted to eliminate that, so that there would need to be an application, and obviously the committee could decide that they want that any variation application to come back before them. They could decide that today.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Whilst we're on conditions, and again, I don't know how feasible it is because we haven't actually got close enough pictures, but would there be any way we could put some landscaping between or behind the fence and the building, because obviously that often acts as a buffer as well, so for absorbing noise, but also from a visual aspect. I'm sure people would rather look at bushes rather than a building. Is it possible to put a condition on for landscaping?
Do you mean, sorry, excuse me, if I can just clarify, would that be between the Grange houses and the building?
Yeah, just because I think it's 27 and 20, which are the two houses, that we're going to have quite a clear view into the back of it. Is that right? I'm not very good with my north, south and easts and wests. 28, it was really just to kind of break up the kind of, because it's quite a large building. If we had some, you know, a few trees put along there, it might just break up that kind of visual aspect of it. Would that be appropriate?
It depends if there is enough space, but I think you would struggle because the bank starts just about straight behind the building and it's quite a steep slope. So I'm not sure what kind of landscaping they could put in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just thought I'd ask, as I say, I couldn't really see from the photographs, and I did try doing a bit of a satellite Google, because it's not there, you can't really see. Okay, that's fine. Any further questions, members? I'm not. Ooh, are you still there? What's happened? Sorry, something happened there. It was a bit odd. I'm not seeing any hands. As I say, I'm working off my iPad, so apologies if I'm missing. Oh, Daniel, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, Convener.
Yes.
Sorry, Convener, that's a legacy hand.
Oh, is it? Okay, that's fine. Okay, right. I haven't. Councillor Copeland, are you speaking? I couldn't just see your mouth.
No, nothing. Breathing.
Okay. Right. Any other questions? No. Okay, I'll be moving the officer's recommendation, which is one of approval. If we could just reword the first condition, which means that they can't come in, and if there is a variation, request not to do what you call it, a noise assessment, that it would have to come back to the committee. Can we get agreement with that, members?
Agreed.
Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you, folks. Right, and that, apart from the date of the next meeting, is business concluded.
Sorry, did you want me to do a quick roll call?
Oh, yes, sorry, thank you very much.
Recorded.
Apologies, Mrs. McBain, just well I've got you.
So we'll just do a quick vote to make sure everybody's in agreement to approve the application. So Convener?
Agreed with the modified condition 1.
Yeah. Councillor Stewart?
Agreed.
Councillor Allen?
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Cook? Sorry, Radley. Sorry.
Agreed.
Councillor Copeland?
Agreed.
Councillor Cormie?
Approve.
Councillor Gregg?
Agreed.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Agreed.
Councillor Malik?
Agreed.
Okay, so the application is approved with the variation on that condition 1. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all, and apologies for the technical glitches with my system today. Next meeting for the Planning Committee is Thursday the 18th of March, although we do have a predetermination hearing. Ms McBain, can you just remind everybody of the dates?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, so the hearing will be held next Thursday, the 25th of February, so I'll get the agenda out this afternoon.
Okay, folks.
And it'll be via Teams as well.
Absolutely. All right.
Thank you.
Hopefully my system will be better by then. Okay, thanks all very much for attending
Thank
today.
you.
All right, bye now.
Right.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.